Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Conlan. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales for NetX. NetX is a systems integrator based in New Jersey. We've been in business for 25 years, and we pride ourselves in having a very strong technical team as it relates to all aspects of enterprise data and enterprise security. In today's topic, we're going to talk about cybersecurity, which is obviously very topical and very important to most people, especially in light of the current climate that we're running in. I'm joined today on the cybersecurity webinar by Jade Witte from TD Synnex, who's a cybersecurity analyst, and Jade will be talking about zero trust architecture in a few minutes. Also joined by Jeff Garner, cybersecurity expert, and that's on the security training awareness platform. Very important aspect of being sure that all of your employees and partners are aware of what to click on and not click on. So that'll be an interesting topic to get educated on. And then lastly, Jeff Michael, Director of Engineering from Siren, which Siren is an enterprise email security platform that will get some good education. So the intent of this webinar is actually to be both informative and educational. And so as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, you can use the chat button on the top of your screen and just type in your questions. And at the back end of the presentations, we'll do a Q&A. And there'll also be, I'll come back on and talk to you about other pieces that if you want to go further to get more information from what you heard today, we'd be happy to do that. And we'll have all of your information. We can reach out to you after the webinar is done. So appreciate you all being on today. Again, Kevin Conlan with NetX, been around for 25 years. We're a large Symantec Veritas integrator. That's where our roots are from. As a result of all of the work that we've done across various different verticals, enterprise, hedge, healthcare, education, government, fintech, pharma, insurance, we have all of those customers that have expressed concern about the security of their data in their enterprise. I had a breakfast meeting this morning with the Veritas folks, and I asked each one of the executives at the table, I said, what are you hearing from the customers as the most prevalent concern? Without fail, every one of them said cybersecurity. They're all worried about ransomware attacks, about education for their employees, and the like. So that's what the purpose of today is. Hopefully we're going to educate you, and you'll get some good information out of this, and we can do some follow-up, as I said, on the back end. So I'll start my first speaker introduction, Jade Witte from TD Synnex. Jade, the floor is yours.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. I'm excited to be able to present today. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and it's been in IT, but with a focus on cybersecurity in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's really rejuvenated me on the industry, as it's sometimes easy to get burnout, but cybersecurity is so hot right now. And I'm going to talk about something that is, it's a methodology, it's a way of thinking that is really catching on, and it's really critical that we move to this new way of thinking. And the reason why it's so critical is it's basically, if you break it down to, if a hacker really wants in, they're going to get in. And this is why we need to make this shift. So you think about penetration testers that we hire to test our systems and make sure that where our vulnerabilities and plugs are. Penetration testers or ethical hackers always get in. If they're anything worth their salt, they're going to always get in. So if a hacker can always get in, then we have to change our thinking about how we're approaching cybersecurity. The Verizon data breach report that comes out every year says that a hacker is in our network on average 180 days before we're even aware that they're there. So they're planning their next ransomware attack. They're leveraging direct ties that we may have to other lucrative targets. The supply chain attacks have grown exponentially in the last few years. So hackers know how to get in. So then there has to be a shift. We've traditionally looked at cybersecurity from a castle and moat perspective, where we're trying to keep the bad guys from getting inside. So it's important that we do that, but we need to assume that the hacker is already in our network. they've been in there for 180 days minimum, then it's more about how do we prevent them from getting to the sensitive data before I can find them and I can boot them out. So that's the shift. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So as we talk about zero trust architecture, I kind of want to break it down and define it for you. And I think a great analogy is to think about your home. So we have locks on the front door, we have it on the back door, we have locks on our windows. Let's say an intruder comes in through, just say, the front door, and they are now in your house. They have pretty much free reign and the ability to move within the whole house. So, but what if we put locks on every door in our house, in the hallways, and we isolate that hacker? So they come in through the front door, but they're isolated to the living room, let's say, and they can't go into another room without having to breach another system and get into another area. If we can isolate them, we hugely increase our chances of being able to stop them from getting to the critical data and boot them out. So all cybersecurity generally hangs on this one concept, and that is knowing who is who and what is what. Who is supposed to have access and what device is supposed to access. So that second part, what device, is one of the critical components. We're evolving our thinking to not only protecting our assets from outside the organization, but to protect our assets from within the organization. We need to continually validate each user is who they say they are, and are they still authorized to access what they say they want to get access to. That key, continually looking at that, is so vital. So the concept of trust but verify is really shifting to the concept of never trust, always verify. Never trust anyone or anything on your network ever. Sounds daunting, it's cumbersome for employees, but really it isn't. It's truly a shift in how we approach cybersecurity. Assume that the hacker is already in your network and you want to give yourself a fighting chance to find him or her and prevent them from getting more data than they should. So we're evolving our thinking to not only protecting our assets from outside the organization, but protecting our assets from within. So we know that once the hacker gets in, they are able to move laterally within the organization. We need to continually validate each user is who they say they are. So zero trust really is about authenticating people, but it's equally about authenticating devices. It's a concept that I'm never going to trust, and therefore I'm going to verify every single time you say you are who you say you are, and your device is actually your device, and make sure that it's allowed to be where you say you need to be. It's not good enough to just have login credentials, because if a hacker got a hold of those credentials and is imitating someone, then they have access. It's critical that the devices that are associated with one person logging in are also linked and exposing the bad guy. If the system doesn't recognize the device, then it should deny access and make the person jump through another hoop or form of authentication. So all of this sounds challenging. It is a little bit, but the good thing is much of it can be handled behind the scenes, so employees are not as impacted as it might seem. Yeah, there's inconvenience, but when they understand how this keeps the company safe from going out of business, they get on board. So educating employees is key, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that from one of the other presenters. So definitely education is a key component. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the key components of zero trust. And think of zero trust, it's not a technology, it's a methodology, it's a strategy, and there are certain key components to it. I'm going to go through each one of these. This slide's going to be it for a while. So micro-segmentation of your network. So we kind of touched about that a little bit with the analogy I gave about the home. The bad guy is likely already in your network, so what are you going to do about it now? Can that bad guy go wherever they want to go in your house, or are they only limited to the rooms that they gain access to? So perimeter security, which is what is important, is kind of that castle and moat. It is important, but it doesn't stop the traffic that is within your network. I mentioned moving laterally, or they call it east-west traffic. So when your users are moving laterally and accessing data, let's say in the data center, and that data is moving back and forth, there is nothing really stopping that. And that's where the hackers know that, and that's what they're taking advantage of. They know if they can penetrate that exterior, they can move laterally within the organization and get access to the data. So microsegmentation creates segmentation and isolation with the endpoints. So it determines which endpoints have access to each other, and stopping access when an endpoint is trying to access a certain area where they're not supposed to have access to. And it uses a concept called least privileged access to do that. The next component is identity access management. I have to touch on these very, briefly. These are a whole discussion in and of itself on each one of these, but I want to give you the critical key components. Identity and access management is really critical. It's kind of central to the whole strategy. It's important to not only identify the user, but also the devices, as I was mentioning earlier. It requires all devices and users, regardless of whether they're inside or outside of an organization's network, to be authenticated, authorized, and regularly validated before they're granted access. You need to know what's going on in your network, and so tools such as a SIM tool, security, incident, and event management, will bring all the logs from different devices on your network together, and they correlate that data to give us the visibility into what is going on. So on our network, and it is the foundation upon which we are building things such as orchestration and automation, which I'm going to talk about next, which is where we're going to be managing all the things, and we're going to be doing this in a zero trust environment. So I'm going to have to pick up the pace a little bit to get through everything. So I'll just try and brush over a little bit. Analytics and orchestration is critical because it is determining when people are logging in at different times of the day on our networks, when they're accessing information, being able to correlate data and know about heuristics as to when people are accessing at certain times, and being able to determine what's normal for a user. So if someone is gaining access, they have login credentials, but this is not typically when they would log in to access certain information, then that can trigger an alert. And orchestration kicks in to basically shut that person off and deny them access or make them jump to another hoop. Multi-factor authentication is huge right now. There's a shift happening across the board because we really are trying to move away from creating passwordless authentication. Passwords are one of the easiest ways in. People, with all the training that goes into it, people are still using the same passwords for different systems, and they're not complex passwords. So it is one of the gaps, but using multi-factor authentication, where there's an app that's pushing the validation to you, is becoming critical. Privileged access management gets into the idea of administrators having to not be sharing the same administrator credentials and being able to gain access to the systems. Being able to determine which administrators have actually accessed code or changed different things, different settings, is critical in being able to protect yourself, because a lot of times it could be a disgruntled IT guy that is doing something nefarious, and being able to determine who that was is critical. If everyone's sharing the same access passwords, then that's not going to be stopped. So software-defined perimeter is another concept. SASE. Let me just touch on software-defined perimeter. It's really basically hiding where your network, your devices, all your equipment, so that when a hacker gets in, they're not able to easily tell where to go within your network. Encryption is critical because we want to protect the data from within as well as going outside. We think of protecting or encrypting data going outside, let's say into the cloud or wherever we're going, but within the organization is critical, because if you think about a hacker already being in your network, you want to encrypt the data that's traversing within your network going between users and applications. So encryption at that level is important. I have to breeze through. SASE and CASB are also critical because the cloud is so prevalent, and SASE is just a way of doing that and making it more efficient and effective for people to be able to access the applications that they need to and do it safely. Endpoint detection and response is also critical because we need to know which devices have access and be able to determine how they're linked to those login credentials so that we can know if the person is not only who they say they are, but is that device the correct device? Because it could be some hacker in Russia that has gotten login credentials and accessing, but if they don't have the device, then you can weed them out. So let's go to the next slide. How do we implement zero trust architecture? It all really comes down to your data. At the end of the day, data is king. So data lives on the premise and it's in the cloud. So it would challenge us all to think about identifying the data that we need to protect the most. Where is it in our network? Where is it in the cloud? What is our requirement for availability of the data? From that analysis, we can map out how does that data traverse throughout my network? And because that tells us who should have access to those network paths and what level of protection we should put on them. Center our whole strategy on the data and how it interacts with all our systems and design zero trust on the data flow to our business applications and to our users. We're not going to want to protect all the data all the time, and that's okay. Doing that data inventory is a great way to prioritize your zero trust architecture. If data is the central theme of our approach, it can provide a lot of information in how we go about deploying zero trust. Start small. We don't need to boil the ocean right away. The investment's too large to do it overnight. There are all kinds of things that we can do, and there's technologies that are geared towards smaller businesses and for larger businesses. So which ones are we going to be using based upon getting good advice from people can direct us? And a company like NetX is a great example of a company that has the capability and the ability to guide you through that process in making the right decisions or solutions that make sense for your particular organization. My recommendation is develop a 3-year plan and leverage someone like a NetX to walk through and develop that plan. It all really starts with an assessment, and that is the critical piece of it, an audit of where you are today. Identify your data and how critical or non-critical it is, and then map out a strategy to get you where you need to be over time. And develop a set of rules that feeds into a governance engine. So when we add new technologies to our environment, we make sure that we're not violating any core principles of our business, like limiting access to data from people who need to have access to it. Finally, I would recommend leveraging the TD Synnex cyber range. We're the first in distribution. TD Synnex we're the largest distributor now in the world. And yeah, that's great that we're big, but there's a lot of benefits that goes with that too. But we spent 7 figures on building a cyber range. This is a physical location, but you can access it virtually as well. We do incident response exercises. It's awesome. Bring in a company, they look at running them through a whole exercise of what happens when you're breached. It's amazing when you put people through that process and the eyes start, being in a room like that, you can see that people haven't actually prepared like they thought they were prepared. They don't really know what to do, what steps to do. And this will help them uncover where those gaps are and help them plug it. But we also have the ability to do training. We get into this whole concept of zero trust. We have training courses. We'll go into defense in depth. We have engineers that love to talk about this type of thing. And then we can demonstrate zero trust in a practical sense by showing you multiple vendor demonstrations and what it would look like to, let's say, an EDR solution from a vendor like Carbon Black integrating with a SIM solution like IBMQ Radar, where we could get visibility and information from the IT team to know when something nefarious is happening so it can shut it down. So we can simulate your environment in our cyber range and be able to show you how certain technologies are going to be impacting it. So to wrap up, it's a crazy time we live in from a cybersecurity perspective. It's critical that organizations make the shift, and although many haven't still made it, it's encouraging to see the continual uptick in those adopting a zero trust architecture. With
Great
that, I'll
job,
turn it over to
Jade.
you, Kevin.
Thank you, Jade. That was really informative, and a lot of information there, folks. I like the last slide that Jade had. Was basically, it all comes down to data. It starts small. You don't have to boil the ocean. We can help you develop a 3-year plan. Starts with an assessment. This cyber range that TD Synnex has got is really world class. I've seen live demos of it, and it really can give you great introspect into how well or not so how well you're prepared or not prepared. But you don't want to get hit with a ransomware attack and have to figure that out on the fly, because that's never fun. I've been a part of a couple of remediations, and it's a very challenging thing. So this was really useful. Thank you, Jade, for going through the steps on the zero trust architecture. Next up, we have Jeff Garner from KnowBe4. And this is actually a really important aspect of security in terms of, like, how do you fortify your organization's, last layer of security? That's training your employees, the intellectual capital that you have. So Jeff's going to kind of walk you through how KnowBe4 can kind of help you, address that issue.
Thank you, Kevin. So what this is really all about is there's a shift in the market, in the attitude, in the psyche of people, and it's not just to do training, it's to change the culture of your company. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Everybody has to do training. Some by regulation, some have to, are forced to do it. It's a requirement of their insurance, a requirement of their industry. And the old way of doing training just doesn't work anymore. Piling everybody into the break room, feeding them day-old donuts, and having somebody read PowerPoint slides from 4 years ago just doesn't work. So to have an effective security awareness training regimen, it has to be engaging, entertaining, and effective, and the content has to be delivered in a way that the employees are going to retain it and complete it. Next slide, please. So here is the real reason security awareness training is so important. I have this on my wall all the time, and this is my daily reminder of what we do. It's all about teaching your employees to make smarter decisions. Next slide. So why do you need to do this? Why is it important? It's important, first of all, to recognize the fact that bad emails and malicious attacks are going to get through your perimeter. All the security in the world is great. You need it. You need the zero trust. You need the firewalls. All of those factors are important, but we know that about 7 to 10% of threats will get through that perimeter defense. And defending your network depends on your employees recognizing a threat and taking the appropriate next step. It's a growing problem. Phishing attacks in 2021 tripled early 2020. It's really a skyrocketing problem. And the attacks are coming from all different directions, but the number one attack is to the employee, to the person, to the human layer of your network. So training your employees to recognize a potential threat is the number one way to protect your organization from being the next headline. We have a proven process. I'm not going to go into the actual hows of it today. Kevin and team will be more than happy to arrange that for you. So we're just going to focus a little bit more on why it's important and what you can do to build a good security culture in your organization. Next slide, please. So here are the critical components to run a successful campaign in your organization or a successful program. Content. Content is king. As humans, everyone has a different type and style of learning. People respond to different stimulus. So don't approach your content as a one-size-fits-all. Tailor the messaging, tailor the training to the employee personalities. Deliver content in a way that's appropriate for them on topics that are appropriate for their job. Deliver it to the device that they use. If you've got people working on tablets, use content that's formatted for that. you're going to be able to show your executive teams the value, and you're going to want to be able to show the results to auditors and regulators. So it's important to have that executive support to roll out a very robust program. It should also not be a one and done. This is not something where you can get everyone in a room once a year and give them 3 hours of training and feel that that's going to teach them anything. It's not going to change their behavior. You have to continuously present the information in different ways, and then it's going to influence their behaviors. And people need to be put in a situation where they can make a decision. So testing is important. Simulated phishing gives you the ability to see if they are learning from the training. It's going to give them the ability to recognize and learn how to recognize a potential threat. And then you have to be able to report all of this. Again, you have to have your metrics. You have to be able to do robust reporting. And then the surveys and assessments help you to understand the attitudes of your organization, that you're moving in the right direction, that you're getting people to adapt to the new threat landscape. Next slide, please. Now, this applies in all areas of life, but in the case of know before, the way we look at it is you start in 4 stages. The first stage is lack of awareness. You don't even know what you don't know. They're blissfully unaware, and they don't know that their behavior can affect others. The next stage is awareness. They're starting to, they call it conscious incompetence. I don't know that I don't know something, or I know that I don't know something, and they realize they don't have all the tools. The third step is conscious competence. They know something, they know how to do something, but it's not second nature. So they have to take intentional steps. And what you're shooting for by following this process over time is the 4th stage, which is skilled. It becomes an unconscious reflex. They know what to do. They do it without even stopping to think. It becomes second nature. Next slide, and we are almost done. One of the things you have to do is you have to position this appropriately within your organization. It's important not to make this a punitive exercise. This is a collaborative exercise for all people within the organization. So you want to frame it in that positive way. And that's going to reflect in how the employees react to the testing and the training. The better you can make the experience for them, the more likely they are to embrace it and become more security conscious. The time immediately following a click. If someone fails a phishing test, that is the most critical messaging moment you have. They're going to feel very vulnerable and sensitive that they've fallen for something. And so you want to reinforce with them that this is a learning moment. This is not a punishable offense. You made a mistake, but let's work on getting better. And then part of that is empowering them to make the right decision and do the right thing next. You're giving them new behavioral patterns, things like our fish alert button, a way to simply report messages and make it consistent across the board. Measure and train at their individual competency. I kind of alluded to that on the content side. People will learn and respond to different types of stimulus. You want to make sure that you're giving them the appropriate level. If you give new people the hardest test possible, they're going to get frustrated because they fail. So you're going to help them move along that path to that conscious competence. And then training for improvement. Again, you want this to be a progressive sequence of events. People will learn, they'll be tested, they'll learn more, they'll be tested, and they'll see that progress in themselves, and you'll see it in the organization. And then finally, the frequent phishing. Again, you don't want to do this once every blue moon because people will not be able to learn from it. So you want to have a pattern of frequent simulated phishing tests to let the employees know that it's part of your security culture. This is a standard practice that frequent training provides the best chance at developing proper reflexive behaviors. It's really pretty simple. And next slide should be the last one, I believe. Be realistic. Okay, yeah, thank you. Be realistic in your expectations. This is a a short-term and long-term exercise. If you want to focus on behavioral change, you need to focus on 2 or 3 behaviors for months at a time. You can't effectively train on everything. Plan like a marketer, test like an attacker. Communicate. Be open with your employees. This is something we're going to be doing. Together, we're going to make our organization safer and less vulnerable to attacks from the outside. So you do the marketing to your employees. This is what we're going to do. But then when you start the testing, go after them. I mean, this is what's going to happen in the real world. People will get attacked by bad guys, and you want them to know how to react. View the awareness as the vision of an organizational culture. Focus on understanding the different personalities, drivers, and learning styles within your organization. This will help you personalize the approach and make it much, much more effective. Leverage behavior management principles to help shape good security hygiene. Embrace best practices. Formulating goals before you start. Getting the executive team involved. Prioritizing and making your messages and training relevant. Phishing frequently and testing frequently. Build a network of security champions, inclusive of all roles within the company. Make sure that there's someone throughout the organization in different departments and different locations that are encouraging their peers and their reports to practice good hygiene, practice good security measures. And then finally, changing employee behavior to be less susceptible to social engineering requires a consistent and repeatable approach to security education. Security awareness done right engages users and moves their natural reflexes from being unaware to being proactive and competent in identifying potentially hazard social engineering tactics. Successful behavioral change starts with clear communications to employees on why security education is important, and it also aligns with the organization's unique culture and workplace dynamics. Rolling out a realistic security awareness training program will empower the users to protect themselves and be part of the solution. Next slide. If you have any other questions, if you would like to arrange a live demo of the platform, anything at all, please feel free to reach out to Kevin or to me. We'll be happy to set something up. Thank you very much.
Great job, Jeff. Thank you for walking through. Folks, I would say from a standpoint of importance, this is not something that's a want to do. It's a have to do, right? It's one of those things where it's very important to have education, because that's the intellectual capital is where you're most susceptible. And I have to profess that we've incorporated KnowBe4, and they say the highest number of errant clicks come from salespeople. I was guilty of it early on, but I've gotten better in time. But it's an important tool in your arsenal. As Jade talked about zero trust architecture, this is an educational platform that will, and they do a really good job of kind of creating the content. It's easy to digest, it's easy to learn, and it's not cumbersome. Is probably the best way I could say it. And sort of the next platform up is Siren, Inbox Security. They kind of go hand in hand with KnowBe4, and what I mean by that is that the KnowBe4 is sort of your front line of defense, educating the employee. Siren basically is sitting there as the guard to prevent the malicious malware from spreading in the organization. And we'll have Jeff Michael kind of go through and talk through how they do that and other aspects of the platform.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate your time. So as you mentioned, I'm just going to kind of go over what Cyren Inbox Security is, kind of how we can help with your security practice you have going on, and kind of exactly what we can do for you. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So the number one thing is most people have never even heard of Cyren. So I bring up this slide just for that reason. We've been around for over 20 years, and through our technology, we process over 3 billion emails a day. So we've been in the threat intelligence business for over 20 years. People like Google and Microsoft and FireEye and a bunch of other Zscalers and a bunch of others, they trust our technology. They trust our threat intelligence. They trust our understanding of things like phishing They trust our understanding of things like malware and bad domains and things like that. And so about 2 years ago, we decided, you know what, we have all this threat intelligence from 20 years. We're one of the experts in that, and we got all these people trusting us. So let's come out with a product that's really going to leverage this and a bunch of other additional things. So you can go to the next slide for me, please. So as we started, and you can just, if you can fill in the slide, that'd be great. As we started looking at kind of where we wanted to be, so, even Gartner and Forrester said, you know what, everybody has a secure email gateway. Everybody does. Everybody is going to have some kind of cloud provider or things like that. You need something additional on top of that, because no matter what gateway you have, no matter what level of Microsoft E5 or ATP or whatever you have, you're still finding threats in the inbox. Next slide, please. So that's where we come into play. Those threats are going to get through what you have, be it phishing, be it BEC, business email compromise, or be it some very significant malware. So that's where Siren Inbox Security comes into play. We are an inbox detection solution. I hate to say we're a mail protection solution, because we're not a gateway. We have no desire to be a gateway. Our desire is to sit where the user sits, and that's at the inbox. Next slide, please. So when we built the product, that's exactly what we decided. We said, where else on the network do users interact with every day that contains the possibility of BEC attacks, phishing emails, malware, but it also has things like trade secrets and confidential information and things like that. And so that's why we decided to architect this around the inbox. When no hardware, no software, no routing, nothing like that. It's 100% API based, but we're focused at the inbox. Because the inbox, like we said, is where the bad stuff is happening, and the confidential and the trade secrets and stuff like that is happening. So that's really the focus. I've been doing cybersecurity for 25 years, and when I always thought email, I always thought network. So it's a new spin on it. Forget all the networking stuff. You have your secure email gateway, all that stuff is great. We are focused on where that data is actually sitting, where the users are actually sitting, is at the inbox. Go to the next slide, please. So what do we solve? The problem that Siren fixes is exactly what I addressed before. We don't care what kind of secure email gateway you have. We don't care what kind of, Microsoft ATP, what rules you have in place and things like that. Where it all really boils down to is we care about what threats are left in the inbox. Because really in your organization, that metrics of the threats in the inbox translates to how many hours of investigation you have to do, how many times your guys have to dig through emails and things like that. So that's where we specialize, is taking that pain away and removing those threats from the user. The numbers on the right, we just recently closed a deal for a large financial institution, and they happen to have E5 ATP. After running for about 3 weeks, we found 320 threats that were completely missed by every solution that they had in E5 ATP. And those included over 207 phishing emails, 109 BEC attempts, and 4 pieces of malware. And some of that malware was very, very malicious. And so that's really what we did. And we showed these numbers to the customers. They pulled it up, and that's why they purchased this. Otherwise, they would have had to either have manually investigated those 320 threats, or even worse, they would still be sitting at a place where a user could click on that URL. They could open that file. The user could do more harm. We are a firm believer in the less amount of time that anything is going to sit in the inbox, the less likely that a user is going to click on it or open it. Next slide, please. So this is kind of our summary slide. People always ask, what do we do and kind of how we do it? And this is very important when we start talking about inbox security. I talked about all that global threat intelligence and things like that, and the API integration. The piece that I really like is that security empowered by your employees. So being able to have an employee actually alert something. So let's say an email comes in and goes to 20 people, and one person clicks the Siren button and says, I think this is bad. Through our incident response team, we'll actually remove that from all 20 mailboxes. And so that one user has now dramatically impacted, in a positive way, the security stance of your organization. So we really take a look at how the users are acting, what are they doing, and things like that. And so all four of those things combined allow us to have that continuous monitoring, that automated remediation, which is important, as I talked about before. We need to get that out of the inbox as soon as possible. And then using your users as detectives, kind of that crowdsourced user detection is really key when you're looking at inbox security. Next slide, please. So one of the things I just put this up here really quick is, we talk about that continuous remediation and detection. There's a lot of people, when you think email, you think signatures. And I just want to say we do so much more than signatures. We're going to do things like unpack the files, crawl the URLs, walk things. We do use signatures, but look at the heuristics. Look at the number of times you've seen emails from those domains and stuff like that. And that's why because of these things, it's why we're so successful in detecting things over the top of every other solution out there on the market. Next slide, please. So I got one more slide after this, but this is really what it boils down to. The thing that people love about Siren is we have no hardware, no software, 100% cloud-based. I run the SE organization for Siren, and I tell my guys, if it takes you longer than 10 minutes to deploy this, that you've had issues. It's very quick, very easy, no modification of anything, which is very powerful. But being able to protect your organization, we don't care if it's 30,000 users or 300 users, being able to protect those in an instant is really another power of Siren. And I have one last slide, and then I am done. So why go with something like Siren? These are all the things I mentioned before. It's being able to work at the inbox. It's a new level. I would dare to say that almost anybody on this call, you have secure email gateways and you have things like that, but what are you really doing to monitor where the user actually sits, the inbox? What are you doing to protect that inbox? And these are the 5 things that we really do to help protect that inbox instantly and get those threats away from the users and dramatically reduce the workload on your IT team and your guys investigating things like phishing, BEC, and malware. I appreciate everybody's time, and that's all I got today. Thank you very much.
Good job, Jeff. Thank you very much. The one thing I would say about the platform, it is very easy to install. We've actually incorporated it into NetX, and it has flagged a lot of malicious malware and phishing attacks, and kept us up and running, which we're very appreciative of. So great job, Jeff, sort of espousing the value and also how easy it is to both configure and deploy. The last slide that you had up there is basically sales@netx.com. If you want any follow-up or you have further questions, please send an email to that. I will send an email out to you personally, everybody that's on this webinar. And thank you for your attendance. And if you have any questions, you can just reply back to me, and we'll set something up, whether it be a cyber range visit or a penetration test, or whatever the case may be. We have a lot of avenues available to help you get into this if you're not down the path already. Hopefully you found this informational and educational. I want to thank the speakers for being on today. Appreciate your time, and look forward to another webinar in the near future. Thank you.